evening, dear viewers. We are gathered here again for our next and most incredible and fascinating interview that would be presented to you fresh from the American Academy of Dissident Sciences. We are here at a secret location in Pasadena with some of the most astonishing speakers and authors and researchers in this field. But let us first present the topic of our interview tonight. We will try to talk about the highest echelons of the secret societies on this planet, the highest echelons of Freemasonry, of the Knights Templars, of the Illuminati, secret societies that are probably secret for this very simple reason, that there are a lot of secret things going on at their highest echelons that should not get into the public under any circumstances. And from our humble knowledge into the field, we will try to create a picture to elucidate this puzzle, to put the jigsaw puzzle together. With us here tonight, we have the incredible pleasure to have Eustace Mullins, who has been writing in the field of conspiratorial and has been exposing the secrets of the American evilarchy, as some researchers call it, for more than, how many years already? 50 years?
50 years, yes.
For more than 50 years. And he has published about 15 books,
15 books, yes.
And 5 videos that would also be, the videos will be available. They are already available from the American Academy, and probably some of his books, because I'm sure that there will be an incredible interest in these topics. With us tonight is also Jordan Maxwell, who has been investigating for how many years already?
35, 36 now.
The secret symbology, the secret symbolic graphic language of these secret societies, the messages that are transmitted through these symbols and how they influence the public subconscious, and basically the education, and most of all the education of our children. So at the end of today's discussion, we would go to the education of the young generation, and to the new and upcoming and probably the most interesting book by Eustace, which is
Education for Slavery.
Education for Slavery, Education for the New World Order, Education for this new and upcoming global socialism or communism. A lot more hideous and a lot more sinister than anything that the regimes of Lenin or Hitler or Stalin or anywhere in Eastern Europe after World War II, even possibly in North Korea, any of these evil totalitarian regimes were able to attain. So let's start the discussion with just a brief picture, a brief analysis of the top echelons of these secret societies and the practices that they are involved in. It has been widely rumored that the top echelons have been engaging for centuries in homosexual practices, that they have been using these homosexual practices for mind control, not just for horizontal recreation or for kinky horizontal recreation, but for the specific purposes of mind control and of influencing their members. What would you say for that topic, Eustace?
Well, there's no question that there is a demonic element in homosexuality, which, by the way, the psychiatric profession has never dared to touch. Of course, you cannot treat a homosexual by a psychiatrist without going into the demonic practice that it really is. So this remains a great gap in the treatment and in the literature on homosexuality, because you see, this goes all the way back to the dawn of history, to Genesis, to the Canaanites, the curse of Canaan. And the Canaanites have always used homosexuality, not only for control, also for to break down the integrated personality, which gives you a much more pliable subject. And it's a basic feature of behaviorism.
It's very interesting. I mean, we would not like this tape to sound as another gay bashing tape. We have nothing against probably 95% of all gays that are basically practicing recreational homosexuality. What we're interested in here is the very small percentage of gay men that happen also to belong to the social subset of secret societies, and especially the most high echelons of these secret societies that engage in homosexuality for totally different purposes, namely for mind control, for social control, and so on. What would you say, Jordan?
Well, if you remember that secret societies as social movements, as Eustace says, go all the way back to the beginning of man's history. And there has been two schools of thought concerning the modern-day Freemasonic societies. One is that they started out as a good idea and eventually got corrupted, or that they never were any good to start with, and that any society that needs to operate in secret just was not any good to begin with.
In the middle of the night.
Yeah, and so I tend to believe that anytime you have societies operating in secret, there's always going to be this element of activity that's covering something. And it's fascinating, as we were saying before, when you get into the symbols and emblems of these ancient secret societies, going all the way back to the Sumerians, and as he brought out the ancient Canaanites, throughout the Middle East, symbols and emblems are like alphabets. It's like symbols in the alphabet. If you put enough of them together, they will tell you a story. And that's the kind of thing that I've been interested in years, is the way these emblems and symbols in government, religious orders, fraternal orders, all have connecting emblems and connecting concepts, and it's a fascinating subject.
It's a very secret alphabet that allows only the initiates of the highest echelons of the secret society to understand the messages. It's like a subspace channel coded message of
if you understand
hyper words.
If you understand that doctors have their own language, attorneys have their own language, the clergy have their own terminology in their language. It's only to be even teenagers and young people have their own language, and so it's only to be expected that secret societies would have their emblems and symbols and ways of connecting themselves to each other in foreign lands and terminology. But I'm saying that if you go into the national coats of arms of nations, flags, all of the harlotry of the coming out of the Middle Ages, all of these things have a very powerful significance on the world in which we're living today. And there's a whole world of knowledge operating beneath civilization.
I've heard some rumors. I mean, basically, we cannot in 2 hours here bring indestructible evidence. A lot of the discussion tonight would be about rumors and stories and so on, but still they paint a picture that is quite a bit self-standing. I've heard, for example, stories that the highest echelons of the Knights Templars are a Sodomic society. What would you say on that matter?
Well, I think that's true. I think that's borne out. And in fact, when the King of France, I think it was Philip, went after the Templars, homosexuality was one of the reasons for the crackdown on them. But of course what he really wanted was the fortune, the great treasure which the Templars had amassed, and also he felt that they were a political threat, and so he would gain several objectives at one time and also gain their treasure by attacking them on the, by then I think, well-established grounds of homosexual practices.
So basically there is no way for somebody to go that high in the hierarchy of these organizations without being homosexual, at least in the Knights Templars.
I think not. I think it's almost like a very advanced initiation ceremony, and of course, engaging in homosexual practices becomes a final committal to the innermost purposes of the order. And once you've done that, and I guess there's no coming back really once you've been initiated into homosexual operations or activities, you can no longer be a non-homosexual. There's no coming back from that. And I think that they realized this and that they wanted this as the final commitment from the official.
How about Freemasonry? Have you heard any stories about the highest echelons of Freemasonry engaging in?
If you go back into the most ancient times, religion has always had sex connected to it, and especially the occult religions are very, very connected in so many ways to sex. Sex was a very big part of the ancient world and of the symbols coming out of the ancient world, and it even comes into our modern day in so many ways that we don't even think about, such as the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. is the male phallic, and it connects with the Oval Office, which is the female, which is the generating force, which is the G for Freemasonry. The G within the square and the compass stands for the generative force of sex. And as I said, the ancient world had a very heavy influence on sex. Sex was used in all of the rituals,
especially
words and terms and
black magic sex.
Absolutely, and I believe that the people who are at the top of the world today are using sexual magic, and I think that's probably why so much sex is flaunted in movies, television.
The sexual revolution itself, free sex.
All part of not a revolution just for freedom and free sex, but it has an integral part to play in the overall occult movements of the world to open the human mind up to sexual perversion. Also lowers the inhibition in a human being to accept anything. And once you have compromised your morals in that way, you are now ready to be compromised with money.
The next step.
The next step, and with power, and then you've been bought. So.
Because I've heard that basically the highest levels of Freemasonry are quite a bit into homosexuality.
It should not surprise me.
It becomes basically a very cozy boys club, and in a way an initiation into the next and higher degree is probably all the members of that secret Masonic cell taking turns at the
Well, I have once a
newcomer.
I had once a teacher make the point that I thought was very significant, just in passing, that this whole apparatus that we call the secret societies has as its basis a war between the sexes, going all the way back into the prehistoric world. And that for so many thousands of years, the woman was the symbol for spirituality, the goddess. And then with the coming of the Roman Empire, more emphasis was placed on the gods as male. And so today we have this male domination of the world, and yet there is this very important connection between male, female. Well, that's why you had temple prostitutes in the ancient world, because there's a lot of very important connections can be made between the act of sex and the psychological connection with God, some sort of a spiritual connection with God during the time of sex. And so that's, I think, very important to keep in mind that probably these people at the top of the secret societies are, without a doubt, sexual perverts.
Eustace, what would you say about another and very interesting secret society, namely the Skull and Bones? Because this is a secret society not of elderly men that have reached the 33rd or the 38th degree of Freemasonry, but these are young kids in the 21-year-old or third year of college that are initiated in that society. Have you heard of any homosexual overtones?
Oh yes, the initiation ceremony of Skull and Bones, which finally began to leak out after many years of total secrecy, The fact is that the initiate into Skull and Bones, first of all, he has to strip off all his clothing, then he has to lie down in a coffin, and there he recites every sexual experience that he has had throughout his entire life, whether with male or female or what they did. And so this is in the presence of his brothers, you see, the fraternity brothers. So in other words, he is totally confessing all of his sexual activity of his life to that time, and they are now in possession of this knowledge so that they have not merely a weapon of blackmail, but a weapon of control, because whenever he sees one of his fraternity brothers around the campus, he knows that that brother knows all of his innermost secrets of his life. And in other words, you place yourself totally in their hands. And the Skull and Bones, of course, was set up by the Russell Trust in 1858 as a branch of the German Illuminati. And apparently this is also an Illuminati technique, probably developed by the Jesuits to force the initiate to place his personal history and all of his secrets in the hands of his fellow members. And then after this recitation of his personal secrets, he then stands up and is supposedly born again as a new person under the guise of the Illuminati Skull and Bones. And the members of this fraternity, by the way, there are other fraternities on Yale University, but it was generally known by the students there that Skull and Bones was the peak. In fact, a Yale student told me one day, he said, it was known on the campus that if you were tapped for bones, you were set for life. You would never have to worry about career or fortune because you would be taken care of. And only 15 seniors each year are tapped, you see.
Yeah.
And they are from the most elite families, the Harrimans, the Rockefellers, and the Bushes. His family was an employee of the Harriman interests, and so that's how Bush was chosen.
Families that have been for many generations into Satanism and black magic and secret societies.
Yeah.
Also, there is a funny fact that when you are induced into the Skull and Bones, you basically lie naked in a coffin.
Yes.
Not only that you recite your past sexual exploits, but you lie naked in a coffin with a red ribbon tied around your lightning rod.
Oh, yeah.
Also, I heard that they do something like a rush where everybody is naked and they kind of jump over and fall over and then pile upon this new inductee. And what goes on in the middle of this frenzied rush, I cannot say, but it looks like kind of a preparation for future Sodomic experiences. Plus another funny initiation rite that they have, you have to go and dig up a grave of a famous person and steal his skull. That's how the skull of Geronimo was stolen by one of the famous boners and brought to their shrine, which is a whole building in the middle of Yale University campus. The skull of another famous American, several Mexican revolutionary leaders were dug up and so on, which is like a gory story from a horror movie. I mean, digging up a grave and taking out grisly bones in order to be initiated in a satanic society. If I use the language, the nomenclature of the communist totalitarian governments, basically, this is like a satanic Komsomol society, a youth satanic league, basically a preparation society, preparatory society, so that these members would rise much higher into the highest echelons of Freemasonry and the Illuminati.
I think it's important right there to make the point that the Skull and Bones was a Freemasonic emblem. It is a Freemasonic emblem. It was always on the graves in Europe of high degree Freemasons. On their graves would be the skull and crossbones. They got even the pirates of the Caribbean, even the pirates would run the Jolly Roger, the black flag with the skull and bones.
Not only Freemasonic emblem, but I was reading a book on black magic, and there was a photograph of a table set for satanic rituals, the daggers to kill the victim, and there was a skull and 2 femur bones in the very same exact geometrical position and shape as the emblems of the skull and bones.
Right.
And you know that in the language of symbology there is basically nothing coincidental, and that for me was a very strong indication that there may be some satanic overtones into that campus fraternity society. On top of that, all these strange voices that were coming through the locked doors of this temple, until somebody broke in the 70s, and in one of the rooms they discovered full regalia of Nazi flags, uniforms, swastikas, posters. Basically, it's obvious that on top of being with strong homosexual overtones and preparatory for satanic practices, it also practices Nazi elitist philosophy of the white elite.
Now, this particular area I'm not that familiar with, but I know that the introduction of perverted sex opens up it lowers one's inhibitions to start with, and then opens one up to further corruption. As we said before, that then one is not averse to maybe monetary corruption, and from there to lying to political corruption. And once you're into that lifestyle,
it's a short road.
Yeah, it's a very short road, and you know there's no coming back, because as Eustace brought out, all of your cohorts with you know what you have done, and that's the way that they can keep control over you.
Jordan, you mentioned something interesting about the G letter, the G horse, the emblem on the Masonic shield.
Masonry, the square in the compass has the G in the middle,
and the G stands for
many people thought the G stood for God, and then there were some who felt that the G stood for geometry, which had some basis for belief. But actually, if you go back, it goes all the way back to the generative force of sex, generating the generative force in nature.
In the generative organ, which is the male organ.
Which is the male organ, absolutely.
So that's why only men are admitted in Freemasonry,
yeah, well, it
supposedly.
has quite a bit to do with the superiority of sexual superiority of the male over the female. And as I said, that this goes back to the Roman Empire. These symbols and emblems were used.
And that's why the Mason carry these little aprons, because as this big curtain separates the holy altar in the tabernacle or the shrine from the place where the audience gathers, in the same way here this little apron, this little curtain in front separates the holy altar, the male generative symbol, from the uninitiated population.
No, that's exactly right. That is precisely what the symbolism is. It's the holy curtain that divides the male generative force from the uninformed, or from the mundane. And sex has a very important...
So basically the highest god, the highest altar that Freemasonry bows to is the male generative organ.
That's right.
And that's why that emblem is put in stone in that obelisk in Washington.
DC.
Funnily enough, in the middle of the Park of the Heroes fallen in the Bulgarian Revolution, in the fight against the capitalists and the fascists, in the middle of that park, on a hill overlooking Whole Sofia in Bulgaria, that's my country, way back in Europe, in Eastern Europe, there is an obelisk that is a carbon copy of the Washington Monument. A carbon copy. And behind that obelisk, there is this square, long lake, exactly a carbon copy of that lake, which is the symbol of the female vagina. So basically, these monuments were copied through Eastern European Freemasonry, which was the conspiracy behind communism in all of these Eastern Europe, European countries, all over Eastern Europe. I would like to go now into basically the relationship of sex, and especially homosexual sex, mind control, but Jordan wants to add something.
Yeah, I want to add something in relation to the point that you were talking about Eastern Europe and communism. Are you aware of the fact that the communist symbol of the sickle, the hammer and the sickle, were in fact separate symbols for thousands of years? The sickle was used in one way and the hammer in another. And only until the Communist Party did they put the configuration together, the two occult symbols.
And what was their meaning?
Well, the sickle represented Saturn. Saturn was the god of chaos, Kronos. And that's why even at the end of in New Year's, you have old man time, the old man, and then the baby crawling, which is the new year. And old man time is always hanging on to a sickle. Because old man time that we say goodbye to at the end of the year was the planet Saturn. Saturn was Kronos, or chaos, the old god of chaos who was leaving the old order and the coming new order, which would be the new year.
And how about the hammer? The hammer was the symbol of the order.
Well, and the hammer goes all the way back to the old hammer of Thor, which was the old Aryan hammer of Thor, which was used to reconstruct. You tear down with the hammer and then you build up.
No, you tear down with the sickle and you build up with the hammer.
Well, yeah.
So what I see here is a pictorial graphical expression of this same old satanic slogan of Ordo ab Chaos.
That's exactly right.
Order out of chaos. You hammer the order with a hammer that was created out of the chaos of the sickle.
That's right.
Fascinating.
The sickle is used to
Ordo ab Chaos.
And the hammer is to build a new order, so that Ordo ab Chaos.
New world order out of the chaos of...
and let me make this point that Saturn was called Chaos. That was the name of a god, and that god is traced back to the planet Saturn.
Fascinating.
So that old man time at the end of the year is actually the planet Saturn, or Chaos.
So let's go now into the connection between homosexual sodomic practices and mind control. What would you say, Eustace, about, well, let's say, the certain research that was done by Wilhelm Reich in Germany and several others that you were mentioning on...
Well, of course, Reich wrote The Function of the Orgasm, and I think that his understanding of the function of the orgasm was that it brought you into a relationship, not merely a sexual relationship, but a relationship of submission to control, a final submission that you would never rebel against anything, because once you've made this, actually given your body and your integrity, the integrity of your body, you know, the sexual act is generally called, if it's not in the marital realm, is generally called a violation. You violate a child, you violate another person, and so by submitting to this violation, you sort of sacrifice yourself to the purposes of the order. It is a sacrificial gesture.
That's very interesting.
We were talking with Al Bielek about the mind control experiments that were going in the underground Montauk base, and he gave a fascinating rendition of the work of Wilhelm Reich, its connection in the American underground bases, work on mind control, with the previous work on mind control done by the SS in Germany, with a still previous work basically of sodomic mind control that is practiced by the black magic priestly cults of Tibet. Would it be the red caps that engage in black magic as a contradistinction to white magic? But basically what the story is that when the student and the teacher engage in such a homosexual act, when the student is brought into a near-orgasmic state, then certain pathways open between the subconscious of the student and the mind of the teacher, and then the mind and the teacher, who is already deep into black magic, and abuse of that personal freedom and personal right to choose your own destiny. The teacher enters into the subconscious and can do all these DOS commands of erase, delete, change on the mind, on the subconscious of the student. This is done in Tibet to impart certain higher types of knowledge directly from the teacher into the student. In exchange, in return, the teacher consumes of these higher classes of energies that are released at the time of the orgasm of the student. And basically in these black rite priesthoods, fornication goes on all day long. If there are girls around, fine. If there are no girls, boys. If there are no boys, all the animals in the courtyard. I mean, this is common practice there that makes no impression on anyone. These practices were used by the Germans, especially by Wilhelm Reich. I mean, the story is that in his laboratory, fornication was going on around the clock. And even here in the United States, he had special, his security guards were basically trained to shoot first and ask questions later, and especially any messengers from the FDA. But they were doing these experiments around the clock. What Wilhelm Reich discovered was, among the many things that he discovered, one of them was the orgone energy. And basically the orgone energy, this is the orgasmic energy, as I understand it. And through manipulation of that orgone energy, they later work on weather warfare, basically weather engineering for warfare purposes, creation of hurricanes, creation of storms, of tornadoes of incredible power, with a machine as small and portable as an armchair, or probably in its biggest size as big and just a machine mountable on a truck. These photographs are very well known from the rare books by Wilhelm Reich that were expurged from the public libraries in the best Orwellian tradition. So back to the mind control. It was very convenient for the Germans, because in the SS they would indoctrinate the highest echelons of SS using these practices. And later on in the 50s and 60s, especially in the underground Montauk base, where Al-Bilik was working as an engineer, they would abduct boys, teenage boys from the streets of Long Island, put them in these underground dungeons, and most of these stories have been related to in our previous films. In the film by Preston Nichols, A Visit to the Montauk Base, they even found the cages where these boys were kept before sodomizing and mind controlling them, in not just changing some of their files, but basically completely erasing their jaws directly and substituting it with a new one, with a totally new personality. And then these boys were supposedly sent forward in time, possibly to be the new perfect agents for the New World Order, let's say in the upcoming riots in Los Angeles. These were experiments done in the 50s and 60s. What a better way to create a perfect anonymous agent without any background. For these of us that have seen the French film La Femme Nikita, about the creation of such a perfect government agent from a lady that was sentenced to death, and the public was notified that the sentence has been carried out, but actually she was not killed and hidden in a special underground indoctrination and training center, where she was turned into a total assassin. The Montauk project was an even more precise and diabolical operation, because there dozens of boys were turned into totally mind-controlled individuals and sent forward in time. And these practices were done through mind control. Much, much later on, they developed electronic chairs where you would be brought electronically to this near-orgasmic state, and then they would do the same mind control operations on you. So let's come back to the basic education of kids. I wouldn't be amazed that this high early introduction to homosexuality is meant not only to compromise the morals of the person, but also to prepare him for future mind control manipulation. Eustace, you were mentioning today that basically in the English boarding schools, these were very accepted practices.
Well, that's true, and in fact, you always had the elites. The children of the elites were always subjected to these practices, because there again, it made them more amenable to carrying out the program. In other words, they would not be rebels; they would be people who would fit in. They would be trained to fit in. Because education, you see, is not merely imparting knowledge education is many things. It is training, and as you point out, it's also seduction. And in fact,
Corruption.
Seduction. I'm afraid education today is mostly seduction and corruption, and the imparting knowledge is a very minor part of it.
And brainwashing, basically the fascinating film by the rock group The Who, The Wall, another brick in the wall, creating new bricks for the total wall, bricks by the millions, faceless bricks that are not different from any other one in this giant wall. Yeah, basically, I mean, these English boarding schools where most of the teachers were single, and it was accepted, basically.
And our American elite was trained in New England boarding schools, which essentially carried out the same practices as the English schools.
Or in all boys military academies, where these practices were carried even more so.
Definitely.
It's fascinating that such homosexual practices have been widely practiced in Japanese culture too. And even in the Japanese culture, they have a very well-developed homosexual poetry and homosexual art. I mean, it is not paraded very much in public these days, but if you are a connoisseur of specialized Japanese art, you will be fascinated at the abundance or overabundance of homosexual poetry and paintings, which means that even there the elite has been basically quietly led into the ways, into the fold, by their secret societies, which, as usual, would have the emblem of the dragon, and we all know that the dragon is the symbol of the empire of independent angels. I want to call them fallen angels on this planet. So, what is the bottom line here of all these discussions? That basically mind control is practiced with all possible means. I mean, in 20th century, a lot of technical means have supplanted homosexuality. We have mind control frequencies beamed at us through the television sets, mind control frequencies piggybacked on the cellular system phone network, microwave frequencies beamed from special transmitters or orbiting satellites that directly resonate with cranial cavities and create the effect of hearing sounds or even obeying orders, basically totally controlling the individual. Microchip implantation for the purposes of monitoring and mind control. Basically, I think that Martin Cannon is one of the best researchers in the field of microchip implantation by the government, with his book The Controllers, which is also available to the public. Through Freedom of Information Act released documents, the CIA has had secret programs in microchip implantation into basically unwitting subjects in the 50s and 60s. We're talking about 40 years of microchip implantation techniques. Microchips for mind control were available well before microchips were officially discovered for personal computers and bigger computers. So my feeling is that this is basically an evilarchy, as we were laughing with Eustace today, demonocracy.
It is a demonocracy, there's no question about it, and it is composed of elitists. In fact, I saw the term used in political magazines a few years ago when some revelations were coming out of Washington about J. Edgar Hoover, who was not only a leading Mason, but also was a well-known homosexual. And the term Homointern was in quite current use for some time. In other words, the world was, instead of the Comintern or the communists, the world was being governed by the Homointern of the homosexual elitists, which really was not far off the mark. And that was only used for a short time and dropped out of sight, was never used again. But I thought
the Homintern.
I thought the Homintern was quite a very telling thing, and I guess it revealed too much because it was not in currency very long. Suddenly it was dropped, never mentioned again. I haven't heard that term in at least 10 years.
I think a very important writings was done about 20 years ago called The Religion of Revolution, in which the article was written by, I believe, Rushdoony, and out of Texas, and it was an exceptionally penetrating article about how homosexuality has been used, and sex in general, but especially homosexuality, has been used to prepare the human race to accept other things. And it was very well documented. It was a very interesting study. And it was called The Religion of Revolution. And it showed how sex was being used to prepare people to accept, as it said, the rape of the people and the rape on their minds, the rape on their freedom, and that sex was a very integral part of all of this.
Sex was used to prepare the people. I mean, what a better example to that than the heavy metal concerts that are used to prepare the young generation for the further acceptance of all these practices. Basically, why would one never find a violin or an harp as a musical instrument as part of a heavy metal band? Because, I mean, these are instruments that basically resonate with the frequencies of the higher chakras, of the highest and basically the several top chakras. So they would be detrimental, counterproductive to a society that would like to stimulate the lower chakras of these lowest basic instincts. On the contrary, the drums and the heavy metal guitar, especially the bass guitar, resonate in the frequencies of the lowest chakra, of the groin chakra, of the sexual drive. So when thousands of kids get titillated to an ecstasy on a heavy metal rock concert, this is nothing more than a audio frequential acoustic massive masturbation, amplified by thousands of watts of acoustic power blasting from the speakers. I mean, there are very nice pieces even into heavy metal music, but I enjoy some of them. But what's important here is that as an overall package, the bottom line is that the heavy metal music does not enhance and elevate the vibrations of the highest chakras that would allow you to telepathically communicate with highest orders of intelligences in the universe. On the contrary, they basically titillate your most primitive basic sexual drives and instincts.
And there's another book that I think you should know about. It's called 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television by Jerry Mander. 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. And in there, he was the owner of the largest advertising agency in America, in San Francisco. And he basically, in the book, outlines how television has used, how it's put together, the mechanics of how television it was designed, how it's put together, and gets into the electronics of it, and then talks about how sex, he brings that point in about how sex is promoted through the television, and how the electromagnetic force field that is around you when the TV is on. It's a very interesting book, and it has a lot to do with what we're talking about here. You might want to try and find it, and it's still available in bookstores today.
I've been thinking for the last month or so, occasionally watching television here, this funny story with Michael Jackson, and with my typically conspiratorial, suspicious mind, what else can a mind be of somebody having the professional or cultural deformation of Eastern European totalitarian communist country? But anyway, I was thinking, what the hell would the family be that would give its child to spend a night or a few nights or even on a regular basis, regardless of what the amount of money is that they get paid for doing that? And I was thinking, could it be that there is some bigger story behind this superficial story we are getting in the media? Could it be that these could be families that all belong to the same satanic society, and that they are giving their kids to be initiated, to be brought in the fold, so to speak, at an early age, because the younger you start, the earlier you start on your career with the basically the young communist league, I mean the corruption of the mind in Eastern Europe, the primary school communist league, then the secondary school communist league, the pioneers, the high school communist league, which is the Komsomol. The younger you start in this field, the earlier you can get into the Communist Party, which is the springboard. Every one of this is a springboard for the next, and once you are in the Communist Party, you are assured a pretty good position. So in a similar vein, parents of such ambitious parents, ambitious and corrupt parents that have been in the fold themselves for a long time, they probably bring out their kids to be initiated. What's your feeling about that, Eustace?
Well, I'm quite sure that this is a factor, and I think this may be going on a lot more in the movie and television industry than we realize, that the families now use, I think the case of the Menendez brothers also brings in some of this, because he was an important figure in the entertainment industry. And so why were these two sons apparently being inculcated into these practices? It could very well have been a vocational program that he was inducting them in.
Absolutely so. And I mean, the whole pattern, I mean, the whole personality of the father of the Menendez boys, an extremely ambitious, overly ambitious individual that started from nothing and rose quickly into that industry. I wouldn't be amazed that the fastest way, the fastest and strongest springboard to rise into the secret societies in the world would be probably to be a member of a satanic cult, which is the innermost core, the innermost circle of a secret society. What's your feeling on that?
Yes, as a matter of fact, you know, they have something in Hollywood. Well, let me go back and say this, that the old Celtic or Celtic magicians in England, the old Druid priest, the magicians, always worked their magic with magic wands. And magic wands were always made out of holly wood. And today, we still have holly wood being used to work their magic on us. And I think it's interesting that when you get into the symbolism in Hollywood, there's something called death head colors in Hollywood. And that is, every time there is to be a rape or a violation of a human being, and especially a death, there will be certain colors which will always come up, and certain symbols are worked into the picture so that subconsciously the subconscious mind picks up these colors and symbols every time there's to be a rape or a death. And around Hollywood it's called the death head colors and death head scenes. And so they're still working their magic on us in Hollywood today. A lot of...
what's your feeling, Eustace, on the Satanism in Hollywood, basically, black magic and Satanism?
Well, I think that Satanism definitely is a factor in Hollywood, because first of all, you've got mass media, mass communications here, which means you reach the entire population. So if there's any place that Satanism would want to have an outlet, it would be here.
Absolutely. No doubt about that.
Yes.
I mean, so many of the films that, I mean, forget about the horror movies, which are not only clear, pure satanic rituals, many of them, but I've even heard stories that the film crew and cast would do a black mass every morning before the beginning of the shooting of such a film.
You know, Merv Griffin a few years ago had on William Blatterly, who was the author of The Exorcist, and he was also the director of the movie The Exorcist. And it was interesting that when Merv Griffin asked him, where did you get all of this material on Satanism and devil worship and all that kind of scary stuff in the movie? And he said, well, I worked for the mind control department of the CIA for many years.
Right.
And he says, and the CIA is definitely up to speed on all of this because they use this throughout the world. And another important, well, I don't suppose I should bring that up, but it was on Merv Griffin's show, so I will. Merv Griffin asked him, he said, well, there was someone else that worked in the mind control department of the CIA at the same time you were there. He says, would you like to comment on him? And he said, yes. L. Ron Hubbard was also indoctrinated in this kind of thinking too, and so I
Fascinating. Fascinating.
Yeah.
I've heard stories that the Monroe, what was his first name? The Monroe. The Monroe guy of Monroe Institute was also a member of the same department with the CIA. It's a very interesting line by Standeo in his book The Cosmic Conspiracy about the infiltration of the intelligence organizations on both sides of the ocean, on both sides of the curtain, so to speak, by secret societies, that basically the empire of independent angels works in the very same pattern. If you know the workings of inside the KGB, these secret societies within the secret society within the secret society, you would know what is going on here in the United States. There is a fascinating film, actually two films that we produced earlier. One of them came from Germany, UFO Secrets of the Third Reich, where they give the whole backbone structure of secret societies that gave the rise of the Third Reich. Half a dozen people were more influential into bringing the Third Reich upon the heads of the German population and all these casualties that were its result, and on all of Europe and the world than anybody else in Germany. The Knights Templar branch for Germany, the Tempelhof-Gesellschaft, organized the Thule Society in 1919. Later on they organized the Vril Secret Research Society. They started with anti-gravity research in the late 20s. They organized the SS the National Socialist Party, to carry on their policies in the broader German population for the creation of a new world order, the new order, the Neues Ordnung that Hitler was talking about, and for the preparation of the coming of the new age. In 1919, the Thule Society was founded for that very same purpose, to prepare the German society for the coming of the new age. I mean, this is 60 years before the New Age became a catchword in California. But this whole secret society within a secret society within a secret society, I mean, this whole system was carried on in Germany. Within the National Socialist Party was founded the SS as an even more secretive organization than the party itself. Within the SS, later on, they founded the super secret society, the Black Sun. And I think the members of the highest echelons of the SS were also members of the Black Sun. So in their special castle, I forgot the German city.
Yes, I forgot the name of the castle.
Babelsberg. They had a very special SS castle that was built over a greatly renovated and enlarged medieval castle.
Right.
But they had an underground round chamber with 12 seats, the usual 12th number, which was their secret chamber for probably satanic and Sodomic practices. And according to Standeo, to come back to his book Cosmic Conspiracy, I mean, this is the pattern of the Luciferian presence on the planet to control the secret societies at the very elite. I mean, to the intelligence organizations through these secret societies. Also, these stories that I heard recently about an interesting sect within the KGB, the so-called castrati, a secret society where the ritual castrations of the initiation of the black and bones into the Skull and Bones Society here, which is a red ribbon tied around the phallus, very scary to the end, and these people are actually castrated, which gives the typical facial expression of a lot of the KGB high members of the 30s and 40s. So we have the same practices over and over and over.